Hi, everyone. This is a short video on coding observational data. So for those of you with observations, you can code observational notes in the same way that you code interviews or anything else. You might be looking for slightly different things. You might be looking for voice, for example, like who in the room has a voice, who in the room is actually doing most of the talking. You might be looking for ways people are negotiating power or decisions. You might be looking for interactions. You might be looking for positioning, how people are positioning each other. You might be looking for equity of voice, equity of interaction, those kinds of things. So those are the kinds of things you can look for in an observation that you can't really look for in an interview. All right. A researcher also might choose to use more deductive codes, ways to observe code observations, especially in classrooms. There's actually many models of how to code classroom data. So there's ways to okay, here's how a bilingual classroom should look, and here's different ways to portion out who says what and what they're talking about. So I'm going to show you an example of that. So for example, if one of my students, as one did, was observing a bilingual classroom and looking for ways in which the teacher was supporting bilingual students, they could do a deductive coding where they're evaluating based on very specific bilingual standards. So here are the things we should be seeing in a bilingual classroom. Are these present or are they not present? Or what's the degree to which they're present? Something like a language scaffold. Or they might be more inductive, like what kinds of learning is happening here? How are students interacting? Those kinds of things, all right? So here's an example of one of the more very deductive ways of coding. You can see here, see this table here. There's all these different crosshatches, and this paper delineates exactly what these codes mean. That if a student is using everyday reasoning in response to a teacher, and giving it as a question, then it would go here. If the student is using scientific knowledge and it's an example or an explanation, it goes here. If the student is providing observational data, it goes here. Does that make sense? So each time something happens, it's coded into this table in a certain way. And there's tables like that and stuff like this for a lot of different kinds of classroom observations. So if you're interested in something like that, it's available in the literature. You can also do something more simple. So you can create your own little tables. So for example, if I'm interested, well, when does it happen that students reason with evidence? How often does it happen? Or what does it happen in response to, right? Or what kinds of situation do these things happen in? So I have two things. I want to know when they're reasoning with evidence and when they're applying logic to problem solving. And I can make a hash mark every time I see them reasoning with evidence in response to teacher questions, or in peer conversation in the lab, or in peer conversation in PairShare, right? So I can get a sense based on the hash marks of how often they're applying logic, how often they're reasoning with evidence in these different settings. Maybe in the peer conversation, it's very rare, but in response to teacher questions, there's a lot, right? And maybe PairShare has a lot of applying logic. Does that make sense? So we'll see different things play out in different situations, and that actually gives you a lot of very interesting data. You also, especially with questions of equity, might be interested in documenting who does what things. So who's asking procedural questions, who's asking critical questions, and overall, who's asking questions, right? So I can make hash marks on boys versus girls to see who ends up having the voice in the classroom. And engaging in these kinds of uses of their voice. You can see where you can create little charts for your classroom observations. You can also code your classroom observations just like you would code any other piece of qualitative data. And that's the video. So very short. I hope you enjoy your coding.